Greetings. Welcome to the Dr. J Vlog series. It's Tuesday, March 5th, 2025, and on Tuesdays we consider music and the arts. As many of you probably know and may have seen, Kendrick Lamar headlined the halftime show at the latest Super Bowl just over 3 weeks ago, on February 9th, at the Caesars Superdome in New Orleans. The performance definitely overshadowed the game in some respects because the Philadelphia Eagles blew out Kansas City 40-22. The game was essentially over by halftime, and that score was a little bit too flattering because Kansas City had a couple of long touchdown passes right at the end of the game to make it as close as it was. But the point is that Lamar's performance was apparently somewhat controversial. And I say controversial because it elicited such a strong, polarized reaction, shall we say, almost a bipolar response between lovers and haters of what transpired. And so, why the split reaction? Was it the importance of the Kendrick Lamar versus Drake beef? Was it a matter of the proverbial white America versus black America, or the younger generation versus the older generation? What about doing mostly new stuff, as Lamar did, as opposed to, when people are used to hearing the well-known classics by the halftime performer? Was there a rift, too, between mainstream pop and rock and perhaps country versus rap and hip-hop? What about corporate America versus the average American? Or perhaps even more importantly, the current political divide between cultural conservatives of MAGA America and the more liberal or woke and diverse cultures of African Americans and Hispanics, people of color in general, immigrants, people from all different walks of life. Well, I'm going to break down a fair chunk of the performance and explain why it's all of the above and so much more. And arguably one of the most powerful artistic expressions I've ever seen. That it should evoke such anger and hostility on the one hand, as well as unrepentant and effusive praise on the other, is precisely why I think it was a performance for the ages. And again, I'm saying this as a 60-something white male, university professor, and whose musical muse is Dan Fogelberg. So I come from a different universe in some senses. So first, let's set this up. Let's discuss some of the main themes of the performance. I'm not going to show the actual live performance. I'll include the link below. So if you haven't seen it, be sure to click on that and have a look for yourselves. But there's so much to cover. If I were to try to actually show the performance and then offer commentary, we'd be here forever. So again, I'm just going to highlight some of the key themes and discuss them from my perspective. So the performance kicks off with the dome, the external shot of the dome lighting up in red, before we see the inside and the field itself, which has been converted into a PlayStation field. There's the PlayStation controller with the triangle, the square, the circle, and the X. And that represents, of course, the gaming universe. So we're going to be playing some kind of a game, as it were. And we're going to learn metaphorically, of course, that this means the game of life, essentially, in the United States. Samuel L. Jackson is the black Uncle Sam, who announces that this is the great American game, which, again, would seem to be football and the Super Bowl, obviously. In reality, though, he's really narrating the game of life in the U.S., and especially as an African American. So cool that his name is actually Sam, if you will. And of course, he's playing the part of Uncle Sam. So one aspect early on in the video displays a vehicle, GNX, which of course is the title of his 6th and latest studio album, released less than 3 months before the Super Bowl in November of 2024. The GNX, or Grand National Experimental, was a specialized version of the Buick Regal Grand National. This is the automobile that was produced back in 1987. And Buick produced only 547 GNs with the interior trim package. that were then sent off to McLaren and upgraded to the Buick GNX. Now, Kendrick Lamar has disclosed on social media that his father used one of these high-spec vehicles to take Lamar home from the hospital after he was born. So the vehicle holds special relevance to Lamar, and the GNX represents something almost unique. In a word, authenticity. And of course, he's launching his Grand National Tour in 2025 as well. But Kendrick's telling us that he's going to share his voice. He's going to tell his story through the halftime show. And he's not going to be bowing down to the corporate America or to mainstream media or what have you, or the popular stuff that everyone wants to hear necessarily. Instead, he's going to be staying true to himself, to his music, to his originality, to his authenticity. And so with the staging of this performance, we then see this illusion of everyone popping out of the vehicle, wearing the red, white, and blue colors of the American flag. So these are all the dancers and the performers. And so after Lamar does his opening piece, he opened with a performance with a teaser from an unreleased song, which fans tentatively dubbed Bodies. And then he breaks to say, "The revolution's about to be televised. You picked the right time, but the wrong guy." That was his quote. And that's about as powerful a statement as you can make under the circumstances. And he's letting America know that he's not just going to placate, corporate America or white America or the rich and powerful or whomever. He's going to do his thing. And so then he transitions into his tune Squabble Up, which was promoted as the lead single from his new album. And then it debuted at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. It means basically getting ready to fight or to argue, or in other contexts, it can mean to take the dance floor. But for the single, it's a powerful and personal set of reflections and an introspective look at his own life, especially in regard to the music industry. But also a broader set of cultural critiques are embodied there as well. So there's far too much to talk about in terms of the meaning of this song and every song that he performs. So I'm not going to keep trying to do that per se. However, I will comment on some aspects of his music and some aspects of some of the songs that I know a little bit more about. I'm not an expert by any means on his full catalog of music. But the broader point that I really want to make is that I'm very thankful to have been exposed to him through CX Violet, my son, several years ago. And he introduced me to his music and really the fact that he's an absolutely brilliant musician and a brilliant storyteller. So that's a win-win in my book. Musically, he infuses different styles. With his he infuses his rap, his hip hop, with jazz, with funk, with soul, and he creates these incredibly imaginative tunes then that resonate long after you finished listening. At least that's what it does for me, and I think that's part of the reason why he's already got 22 Grammys to his credit. And lyrically, he's just got this incredibly powerful voice that captures the complexities and the themes of being an African American and living in the United States, his personal experiences and journey, and travels, in fact, beyond the U.S. as well. So he's able to touch on a variety of distinct cultural themes, and he uses different approaches to do that through his music, through his storytelling. He combines both cinematic and literary techniques to advance his unique narrative style. And that, to me, is in part what makes the work so compelling. And through his brilliance, he's somehow managed to achieve that elusive double of both commercial and critical acclaim. And that's why he also received, for example, the 2018 Pulitzer Prize in Music, and why an estimated 133 million people tuned in to watch that halftime performance. Again, we could spend hours just talking about Kendrick Lamar's unique style, his music, just that alone, to say nothing of what happened through the halftime performance. But that's what we want to focus on. So after Lamar does his brief performance of Squabble Up, Samuel Jackson, again, Uncle Sam, he's representing white America, and he complains after the brief performance that Lamar is being too loud, too reckless, too ghetto. Mr. Lamar, do you really know how to play the game? Then tighten up. You see, again, Kendrick Lamar's supposed to be playing the American game, and he's supposed to be playing it the right way, at the Super Bowl of all places. So that's the command or the request, but Lamar says nope. Basically, he launches then into his song Humble, and he's now standing right in the middle of the red, white, and blue dancers who will have arranged themselves to form symbolically the American flag. So you have the theme too of the Crips versus the Bloods, the blue and the red versus one another, but also you see them showing that the game, as they finish that piece of the song, they then start to march down the field, and it looks like the game of Tetris being played. The dancers descend out of the flag, they go down the stage, and the stage itself is shaped like the game. Okay? And again, the point is that this is very unusual and unexpected, a detour from what you would typically think should be happening, because there's such symbolism that the staging envelops and conveys. But in order to pick up on that, you have to know much more about Kendrick Lamar's music and his life history in order to understand the different themes that are being woven together. So I don't know all of these themes. I don't know all of the things that were happening or all of the symbolism. I'll just, again, mention a couple of things that I'm a little bit more familiar with. So I noticed, for example, that Lamar was running down the field and he's being called out that he's going the wrong way. And if you go the wrong way in a video game or in the world or in life in general, well, you're in trouble. And in a video game, you're likely to die, right? But he's basically saying, F that, I'm going to do what I want to do, right? And these songs that he's chosen to focus on, they're not supposed to be sung at the Super Bowl, right? But he's basically saying, I'm going to do them anyway. And these included DNA, Euphoria, and Man at the Garden. Now, I confess, I didn't know all these songs, but I did see Kendrick Lamar in an interview where he talked about the fact that he was giving voice basically to people who, had a lot to say, who were basically, feeling like they couldn't talk about themselves and tell their stories themselves, or they couldn't find the words to express themselves. And instead, they'd have to turn to violence or to drugs or what have you. And so in that sense, through a song like Reincarnated, which he didn't perform at the show, he's hoping to give voice to the voiceless, to those who really don't know how to express themselves in a more healthy way, and and don't know how to have a really meaningful conversation as a result. And so again, Reincarnated isn't performed, but I just wanted to share some of the lyrics because to me it's just an absolutely brilliant novella of a song, and it kind of resonates and illustrates exactly what he's trying to do with some aspects of this halftime performance. So he says that, in the song Reincarnated, he goes, "But now here we are. Centuries you manipulated man with music, embodied you as superstars to see how you're moving. You came a long way from garnishing evilish views. and all I ever wanted from you was love and approval. I learned a lot. No more putting these people in fear. The more that word is diminished, the more it's not real. The more light that I can capture, the more I can feel. I'm using words for inspiration as an ideal. And then the closing 8 lines. So, can you promise that you won't take your gifts for granted? I promise that I'll use my gifts to bring understanding. For every man, woman, and child, how much can you avow? I vow my life just to live one in harmony now. You crushed a lot of people, keeping their thoughts in captivity, and I'm ashamed that I ever created the enemy. Then let's rejoice where we at. I rewrote the devil's story just to take our power back. Carnated. So, Lamar's, in an interview, he literally said, I gotta make records like Reincarnated. I gotta make records like Man in the Garden, which again, he did perform. So there's a lot happening then in the remainder of the performance, including the idea of him, even daring to play Not Like Us at the show, which is, again, more than just a beef with Drake. It's him saying, I'm going to do this even though I'm being screwed over, I'm being sued, okay? But there are a couple of other important themes that I just want to highlight. So, for example, he slows things down, especially with Luther, featuring SZA. And yes, it's a beautiful love song. It's perhaps one that even those who are unfamiliar with his music could probably enjoy, with a lovely melody and some sweet harmonizing and so forth. There's another layer there too with SZA, who has admitted to her own struggles with mental health issues and suicidal ideation, especially in the aftermath of the sudden deaths of a couple of her former boyfriends, and in light of her experience with the music industry, which she has described as, quote, one of the most stressful, psychosis-inducing industries, end quote, that you could ever imagine. So, and she also, by the way, happened to have dated Drake back in 2009. And so there's that element too. And so she's touring with Kendrick Lamar these days and for this upcoming tour. So interestingly, they also then do part of All the Stars. And he goes right into the following lines. Tell me what you're going to do to me. Confrontation ain't nothing new to me. You can bring a bullet, bring a sword, bring a morgue, but you can't bring the truth to me. And so then he goes on, but then they go, and it's quite an interesting performance. But they then conclude that portion of the show and the song with SZA softening things up again as she sings, "This may be the night that my dreams might let me know. All the stars are closer, all the stars are closer," and so on. So now, with these softer renditions and this the more melodic tunes and so forth, he's playing the game properly. And Uncle Sam comes back to the mic and says, now that's what I'm talking about. That's what America wants. Nice and calm. You're almost there. Don't mess this up. And he kind of cuts himself off there because you're getting to the grand finale now, okay? And so just before Lamar launches into Not Like Us, he raps the following. It's a cultural divide. I'ma get it on flow. 40 acres and a mule. This is bigger than the music. And then the background singers are saying, you really going to do it? Yeah, they tried to rig the game, but you can't fake influence. Okay? And then it's no holds barred, and he goes for it with Not Like Us. So if you don't know much about the Kendrick Lamar Drake beef, well, you can easily find out all you need on the internet. The song, though, ended up winning all 5 Grammys for which it was nominated actually the week before the Super Bowl. So the song actually won Record of the Year, Song of the Year, Best Rap Performance, Best Rap Song, and Best Rap Music Video. So now at the Super Bowl, in this live performance, he did omit, for example, the word pedophile, but he still rapped, "Say, Drake, I hear you like him young. You better not even go to cell block 1, right?" And then a little bit later, trying to strike a chord, and it's probably A minor, and everybody's, in the audience or in the stadium are chiming in with that A minor, right? Really important chord in music, but obviously with a different implication here. So symbolically, just briefly, what he's doing then with the song, and especially his song "Not Like Us," he's got all of the dancers now in the red, white, and blue, all the different colors, but they're all integrated now. Okay, much like U2's Bono sang in his song years ago, "Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For," when he sang, "I believe in the kingdom come, then all the colors will bleed into one, bleed into one." Again, that's from Bono of U2. I don't know that had any kind of an influence here, but I mention it simply because of the similar imagery. And, Bono, from his Catholic background, and Kendrick Lamar is an avowed Christian. And so perhaps you could say he's even quite radical in his Christianity. And he doesn't abide by the hypocrisy, especially that he sees at times amongst conservative Christians. And he's also a teetotaler. He abstains from alcohol and drugs. But he's not going to kowtow either to corporate America or what he perceives to be the hypocrisy across so many levels of society. And you just can't tell him what to do. He's from Compton, okay? And he's always going to stand up and fight the power as Public Enemy rapped all those years ago. But alas, what we see then is that the imagery of that integrated dream of America doesn't last. So as he closes the show with TV off, now that's another of his tunes, everyone's segregated again. The dancers by their colors, and the United States with its profound polarization. So Kendrick tried to bring everyone together in Los Angeles, in the show, and so on. But the cultural divide, the chasm, truly remains. And he closes with "turn the TV off," right? Essentially game over. So he's won the game. He's doing things his way, and even within the rigged system as an African-American man in the United States. The 40 acres and a mule reference, of course, is the reparations from slavery, but the Jim Crow, the lynchings, the kind of an American apartheid persisted decades later, making it difficult for people of color to succeed. And despite the civil rights movement, the core economic and cultural divisions have remained. Now, things have changed, obviously, to some degree, but in general, from a broader kind of sociological and cultural perspective, what do we know? People still tend to marry those who look and sound like themselves, often with similar backgrounds economically, ethno-racially, and linguistically. And that's where I want to conclude my analysis of the halftime performance, using a bit of my own kind of sociological lens and a rather deeper interpretation that I've arrived at in recent years. So, in my view, the divided response to Kendrick Lamar's halftime performance reflects a core sociological wisdom with respect to relational and cultural distances that separate people in social space. So, much of what Kendrick Lamar does with his music, and if you look at rap and hip-hop in general, it's quite different than what many folks, but especially older white folks like myself, would have been used to or would have grown up with. And what happens then when we encounter a language or a style of music or a type of people with which or with whom we're not familiar? Most people tend to struggle with the differences and, to varying degrees, usually end up shutting things down or shutting people out. The research shows that just of course as we learn our language and our accents from those to whom we're exposed from birth, we even develop preferences for and can better recognize people of our own racial background. Again, regardless of the race that you're talking about. It applies universally. So at that level, it's not that anyone's, of course, being racist in a cultural sense, but rather that we just have much greater familiarity with people who look like us, or especially the people who've raised us, the people that we see on an everyday basis. Okay? And whom do we feel uncomfortable with? Whom do we diss or dismiss? Those not like us. In fact, I'd argue that Kendrick Lamar reveals his own biases in some senses and tribalism as well. To single out and put down Drake at the sort of micro level, the level of the, one-on-one beef, but anyone else who's not like us. So instead, we're comfortable and familiar with the environments in which we are raised. If you're raised in Newfoundland and you're in the son or the daughter of a fisherman, well, then the lifestyle, the language, the rhythms and rituals of everyday life are going to be vastly different in comparison with your being raised in Compton, right, as Kendrick Lamar, or Toronto, case of Drake, or Northern Virginia, yours truly, or Appalachia, or anywhere else in the world. And to me, the key issue of, that kind of weaves all of these threads together is that it takes a ton of energy and mental bandwidth to be able to learn about the others and the other cultures with which you're not familiar. Okay? And if you weren't ever exposed to other languages or cultures at an early age, what happens to all of us as we get older? It becomes harder and harder to learn the new language or the new culture, or specifically in this case, the new types of music that have emerged. You have to make a concerted effort to do any of that. And a lot of folks genuinely struggle. And quite frankly, they just give up trying to understand, trying to learn something new. Right? And the proverbial, it's just not worth it. Or I can't be bothered. So, and if I can put this even more dramatically, hate requires far less energy than love. It's still an expenditure of energy, no matter what. Or even what I'd suggest, being kind of a waste of energy. But that's still much easier than love. If you say, well, I hate that music, or, I hate that mood. I hate that food, sorry. I hate Spanish, or I hate people from that country, whatever the hatred is that you want to express. It's a simplistic way of saying basically, well, I don't really understand this thing or these people, and I'm unable and or unwilling to try. Or it might even just be an expression of indifference rather than hate, the I just don't care attitude. But regardless, to love someone or something or another language or a certain type of music or art, that requires a significant investment. An investment in understanding, an investment in becoming familiar with something, especially for the first time or what was previously unknown. And with repeated exposure, we develop competencies and capacities and knowledge, all of which, of course, increases our familiarity and our understanding. We can more readily grow attached and then even start to fall in love with that other thing, that other entity, that other person. But again, it requires that steady investment of time and energy. So, for example, you want to learn how to play an instrument? Cool. Or you might say, oh, I'd love to be able to play the piano. Well, is that true? Because if you'd love to do that, you'd be doing that. You would put in the time and the effort to actually start learning to play the instrument. You say you'd love to learn another language? Then put in the time and start studying, practicing, growing that familiarity and your attachment to that particular pursuit. You say you love someone? Well, you can only do that if you are indeed committed to investing the time and energy required. And of course, to say that you love someone reflects the greatest gift of positive energy that we can bestow upon them. And there's the rub. We don't have unlimited or boundless energy. So hence we tend to be judicious. We tend to be discretionary in our energy expenditures. We don't give everyone our equal attention or equal love. We invest unevenly in people and just about everything that's important to us in our lives. And that, of course, includes music. Okay? So to fully understand and appreciate Kendrick Lamar's music in general, or his halftime performance in particular, you'd need to invest the time and energy to familiarize yourself with his story, with his background, with his musical stylings. For some, of course, that's going to come quite naturally, or because of their ethno-racial background, or their generational background, or their social locations in general. They've grown up listening to Kendrick Lamar and Drake and countless other incredibly talented musicians and performers. By the same token, there are many other cultural niches with their specific audiences, ranging from opera to country music. So our preferences then are overwhelmingly a reflection of exposure and experience. But in principle, of course, we can all learn to varying degrees. We can learn to play a certain instrument if we'd really love to do that. We can learn another language if we committed our time and energy and efforts, if we'd love to do that. And we can learn about all kinds of different forms of music as well, if we want to understand music more broadly. But most profoundly of all, we could learn to love each other, regardless of our status or our background characteristics, regardless of our languages or accents, our age or gender or disability, or whatever other statuses might separate us in social space. But in order to do that, we have to invest the energy. We have to be willing to learn and even in some respects, perhaps change ourselves and our attitudes to a certain degree. And in my experience, that's the toughest thing of all to do. Most of us, most of the time, instead revert to our default settings, or just going with what we know best and sticking within our comfort zones. And so we typically filter out a lot of the noise, whatever form that may take. We filter out a lot of the unfamiliar. And in general, we filter out exposure to those who are not like us, as opposed to the opposite, which would be to display endless curiosity and desire to learn, to understand that which is not like us. Okay, in the infamous words of Forrest Gump, that's all I have to say about that. I mean, we could go on much longer, but this is already a long vlog, and so let's end here for the day. And I hope you've appreciated my particular take. And I mean, it is true, for example, that I lived for about 2 decades in Rexdale, but I don't know. How did I finesse all this shit from Jane and Weston? Oops, snap, what did I just do? Seriously, until next time, may you and yours continue to create peace in your lives and nurture love in your hearts. And perhaps someday, those who were once enemies or you had a great beef with one another might at some point give each other a heartfelt hug. All right, that's it for today. Dr. J out.